Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DevEd Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Eames, and today on our panel, we will be having Brooke Avery.
Hey, everybody.
Sam Julien.
Hey.
Luis Hernandez.
Hola.
And as a special guest, we have Mike Brocchi.
Hello.
Mike, since this is your first time on the show, do you want to take a minute, introduce yourself, give us a little background?
Sure. My name is Mike Brocchi. I am a front-end developer. I currently work for Ultimate Software, which is based out of roughly Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I've been there since October. Prior to that, I did a whole bunch of work for the Angular CLI.
Awesome. So today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about Reinventing Yourself, which is a very interesting title, almost evocative. I certainly have some ideas about this, but I think because it's just such an evocative title, it might be interesting just to go around and kind of see what this might mean to the various members of our panel. What does it mean to reinvent yourself? Brooke, you want to start us off?
Oh, man. Well, totally. Because for me, that's exactly what I did. I think I've said in the past and on previous episodes, but I was in education. My background was completely in a different direction than web development. And I kind of have that personality where I'm just always wanting to learn, always wanting to do something like, I was the kid in college that had a hard time picking what I wanted to major in because everything sounded fun to me. So when I finally chose education, it was because I had explored so many other things that I knew that was where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And even, moving into web development and working with Thinkster, I'm still able to use that background. And I'm so happy to have that, extra whole side to me. But that's kind of what reinventing yourself for me has meant, was a total career change, and going from, leading and teaching classrooms to, initially going to boot camp and then working at Thinkster. And that's taken on a lot of different roles as well. Joe, you and I kind of laugh and joke a lot that you're the CEO of Thinkster, but I'm the CEO because it's like the chief everything officer. And that's just because I've had to
Exactly.
So many different roles, from marketing to helping our authors create courses. And I've loved it. I've loved every minute of it. It's just something where, just like I was saying, my personality is one that I love always learning and never turning away opportunities to grow in different ways. So for me, that's been reinventing myself, is total career change, but always looking for new ways to keep growing and keep expanding.
I think the idea of reinventing yourself is inevitable in this field for two reasons. One is, since the idea of computer science is a relatively new field, a lot of different people come from a lot of different fields, so there's a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different experiences that get melted together. So you almost have to continuously adapt, which isn't necessarily reinventing yourself, but it's adapting and exploring different avenues within yourself. And also internally within the field, the idea of web development didn't really exist more than like 25 years ago, at least as a regular type of employment in the workspace. Because the web wasn't really that big going back more than 25 years. So a lot of that has a lot of reinvention within the idea of software development to include the web too.
Is that it? The end of what you said almost sounded, I don't know, like you weren't done.
I mean, there's a lot more to it and little intricacies, but the idea that you can evolve within the same field by staying with doing development, but doing different things within development, whether or not you do database work or API work or front-end work or styling or functionality, there's a lot of different avenues to pursue that you can essentially reinvent yourself inside the same field. And it's just, I think that there's differences there within software development that don't exist in other fields. Was that more conclusive?
Yeah. Luis, what about your thoughts?
So, this applies to the rest of your life too. We see a lot of motivational speakers talk about this, but you may not be happy where you are. I think reinventing yourself is also something about facing that fear of, I don't know, like, is this going to work or not? So go out there, dream a little bit, see where you want to be and go for it. And as part of that process, you will end up reinventing yourself as part of the process itself. Like, don't go out there and say, I want to change who I am. No, say, who is it that I want to be? And then start moving that way and face that. That's an idea for me.
Yeah, my career is sort of a result of reinventing myself, because I was in finance for several years right out of college, like maybe 5 years. And I just sort of saw that the path of being in finance was not going to be what I wanted. It was just getting to be memorizing more regulations and not really getting to do anything creative or anything like that. So that's how I started teaching myself to code professionally, and what ended up getting me my first development job and everything going from there. So I think it's really important to always be willing to, like Luis was saying, like, if you're unhappy with where you're at, you have to be willing to look at everything freshly and start over. And that's not a bad thing.
All right. So let's talk some specifics here now that we've got a little bit of a framework on reinventing yourself. What are maybe some keys, as each of you here have had times when you have reinvented yourself? What are, key indicators to you that it might be time to reconsider what you're doing and maybe look at doing something new?
I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. For me, I just had this restlessness. I just was not happy. I mean, I was happy. I loved teaching. I loved having my classroom and my students, whatever age they were. But there was just this restlessness. I would come home from my job and I would just feel like, what now? Like, I wanted there always to be something else. And I just wasn't ever satisfied coming home from my job. So for me, it was just that inward sense that there was something else out there. There was something else. I don't want to say better, because teaching really was an awesome job, but just something different that I was needing that for some reason. So just kind of that restlessness for one thing. Other things, though, I think health can always be a big factor. Being a teacher isn't the easiest thing. When you're standing on your feet all day long or kneeling down on your knees all day long, it can be pretty physically taxing. And so that was kind of another thing, was just, is this something I want to keep doing for 20, 30 years? And it wasn't where I wanted to put my energy. I wanted to put my energy more into, like, what I do with development and just kind of exploring more creative avenues. So I think there's different reasons for different people. But for me personally, it was just that inward restlessness of wanting something else. Something that challenged myself was a big part of it. I kind of felt like I had reached a point with teaching that I don't want to say that I wasn't going to grow anymore. I think every year as a teacher, you grow substantially, but I had just kind of plateaued a little bit with where I was personally going to go. And so I wanted something that was going to push me more up a new mountain, I guess.
What are other indicators of it might be time to think about reinventing yourself?
I think boredom comes into play for me, and not so much boredom with what you're doing, but the fact that you're not as excited about something, which is a little bit different than boredom, when I think about it, and that other things interest you. I don't have the experiences of working in a non-programming field, because that's what I've done for the last, way too long, ever since getting out of college in the late 90s. But I have moved around inside the field, and my interests have taken an interesting progression across my career, in that when I first was out of school, a lot of my interest lied in the database. And as my career progressed, I seemed to flow with the data out of a database to the user's hands, and that I worked a lot in the database. And then I moved up to business layer, and then I moved up and did like API layer, and then I did more of a UI layer, and that's where I've been of recent, except for the transition from doing desktop development to web development. But my interest kind of flowed from the idea of storing data all the way to presenting data across the last 20-ish years. But yeah, it's been an interesting idea. As things get interesting, then the grass all looks greener in some area, and you decide to make a change or explore something. But the nice thing within computers is that you can explore that on your own time, or potentially even as part of your job during the day, rather than having to invest additional time outside of work hours to explore without necessarily making a total life change within the field.
Yeah, for me, when I was in finance, I think a big indicator for me was just how much recurring dread I had every Sunday night, that I just was like, oh my God. Like, because by the time I left finance, I had gone from like sales to operations to customer service and stuff like that. And I was bored, and I just dreaded going to work, even though I worked with like good people. And it wasn't like bad work environment necessarily. I mean, sometimes that's the reason people dread, is because they're working somewhere really toxic and they could just change companies and not necessarily change careers. But I think for me, it was like I had done so much in finance over the course of 5-6 years, and that sense of like dreading work and being bored had been there for a while, like maybe 2 years at that point. And the more I progressed, like kind of the worse it got, because the more responsibilities I took on, the more like I was basically just studying for exams and doing that kind of thing. And I was like, I haven't done anything creative in a really long time. What do I need to do to start like feeding that part of my humanity, you know? So that was it for me.
How can you tell the difference between it's time for a new job, you're just in a job that you don't like, and it's actually time to change what it is that you actually do fundamentally, reinvent yourself?
I think that can be kind of a progression in a way. You know, I think you start off with, maybe if I'm not happy with what I'm doing currently with development, maybe I want to do front end instead of back end, or, you know, like try some different things within your field. And if you're still not happy, if, you know, like what Sam is saying, that's such a relatable feeling, I think, Sam, where you're saying you just felt, you know, not just bored, but like that dread. That was what I was feeling too. And I had tried different things. I had tried taking on leadership positions at my schools and, you know, teaching different ages even. So I had explored other routes. I had looked at maybe going into like the education technology sector a little bit. That was actually my segue into web development, was starting to look into ed tech. But even that just wasn't quite what I wanted. So it was, you know, I had to explore around a little bit though. I had tried other positions within education. And once I realized that wasn't working, that's when I said, you know what, maybe it's just time to look outside of teaching. Maybe this just isn't the career for me anymore. And I need to look at what other opportunities there are. And because I had been investigating into ed tech, that was my first real introduction to the technology sector. And then I started looking into development from there. So it was, you know, it kind of led one thing to another. But I think really all you can do is just start small and go from there. It might be too jarring at first to just like totally, and maybe that's the best thing for you. I don't know. But for me, it was just very small and progressive, rather than like one day deciding, you know what, I'm just done with teaching, I'm moving on. So I had to be much more careful about it. And that was what worked for me.
Other thoughts?
I think, you know, your motivators are going to be different depending on who you are. But I think the secret is fear, right? We all know, we all feel that void that we need to fill in. And it could come from internal things. It could come from external pressures that you feel like, I need to do something different because of whatever it is. Brooke mentioned, you know, health issues, but it may be economical, financial. It may be something else. It may be that you're moving to a different country. There are different external factors that are going to push you to, maybe I need to change what I am right now. Like I'm trying to think of this not only about what you do, but more of who you are. Like, how do you see yourself? But normally, at least for me, what always stopped me from doing the thing that I really wanted to do is that fear of failure. So I would say you will know. You know when you need to make that change. The challenge is going to be, are you willing to do what it takes to make the change? But you will know.
I like that, Louise. Like when the sacrifice of putting in that effort becomes less scary to you because the trade-off is like more valuable. So what is it that's holding you back? Is it that failure, or maybe it's money? I know, like, I have a brother who's considering changing careers as well. And for him, it's that he doesn't want to like give up his current job and his current income so that he can go back to school or have to go through training or something. And he would lose that stability for his family. He's worried that that would kind of, make the world fall out from underneath them for a while. And that's totally legitimate. So, but I think there will come the day for him, maybe not today, but just like with me, it was that the trade-off of quitting my job as a teacher and going without an income for who knows how many months, and then also investing in boot camp, that, it was that fear of financially supporting myself and what am I going to do? But I knew it was the right time for me because I was willing to give up. The sacrifice was worth it to me, even though it was scary and I was not sure what was going to happen. It was when that sacrifice was so worth it to me that I cared, but I didn't care. I wanted to make that change enough that the money wasn't the most important thing to me at that time.
I think part of it is just the identification that something's not right or something that you're not comfortable with, that you want to make a change. In terms of whether or not you're just changing jobs or changing careers, as Joe brought up, is to me a level of severity. Whether or not you want to make a change is the first decision. Decide, all right, do I want to stay where I am or do I want to do something different? If I do something different, I'm talking about either finding a job or a career. And then once you've made that decision, it's a matter of investigation to determine what the costs are involved, whether it be time or financial or anything else, to be able to find what makes you happy. And you may start off and say, all right, I'm not happy where I am. I need to just look for another job. And due to nature, I think most people start off looking for doing something similar to what they are doing initially. And as you're doing that, you'll have the emotional ties to that. All right, I'm seeing other jobs and there's other things out there, but is that something that will make me happy? And then if not, then you expand that search to potential other areas within your field or potentially the whole other field as well. That you can almost make that determination as part of the process of how big of a change you want to make and what level of risk and change are you comfortable with, and quite frankly, your family's comfortable with as well.
How did you do it, Joe? I would love to hear your story because your career, you've been in development for years and years, but you've gone from, your everyday developer to starting conferences and events, and now you're the CEO of a company. So how was that for you, and what made you know that you wanted to move into software engineering and then organizing events and then taking on your own business? What was that like?
People just kept making me do it. So I'm just a people pleaser. That's all. That's really what it came down to. I think that for me, the one time that I really felt like I was reinventing myself was when I moved from one kind of development to another. Getting into development was more about trying to find just, do the job, do the kinds of things that I enjoyed doing when I was first trying to find jobs. And I sort of lucked into development as well. A guy who was in the company that I worked for, he needed a programmer and he handed me this is back in, anybody on the panel been programming was programming in the 90s? Okay. So, the day before when you didn't learn languages by getting online and taking courses or reading blog posts, you learned languages with really, really thick books, and mostly it was the manuals, but sometimes you'd head over to, Barnes & Noble didn't exist back then, did it? Was Barnes & Noble still big back then? Yeah, in the 90s?
I don't know about the 90s.
I remember Borders.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was books, right? So he handed me the books. He said, if you could do this after the week, it was like a 3-day weekend. He said, if you could do this on Monday, then, I want you to come program for me. And I really wanted to program. I've been taking classes. But I think what I really consciously reinvented myself was when I was kind of a full stack C# ASP.NET developer. And I was in some ways kind of like at the peak of, a career. I had been doing it for a long time. I was an expert, and there was no reason for me to go and do something else. I was making really good money, and I was only going to continue to make better money. I was I felt like, a lot, not necessarily a total expert, but I felt like I was pretty expert in all the major stuff that it had to do. And I had a lot of opportunities ahead of me to move into, more team leadership type roles. And I just said, I want to do something new. And as people on the panel have been describing, this is like you feel something's wrong and you want to go off and change what's wrong. I don't remember feeling like there was anything wrong with my career or that I felt like I had something to fix. Although maybe it was just subconscious because I definitely felt some sort of a drive, or I saw an opportunity there, and I just decided, I'm going to leave doing C# and I'm going to go and become just a full-time 100% JavaScript developer. And at the time, it was like 08, 09. It was kind of hard because the first job I found, which was kind of like supposedly advertised as a front-end developer, what they really wanted was somebody to manage a big complex CSS engine. It was like a C# engine that managed a whole bunch of really complex CSS that allowed them to white label sites. And so really I was just managing this custom C# engine and doing a lot of CSS work. And I went to my boss and I said, what I want to be doing is doing full-time JavaScript. So, and at the time they were like, that doesn't exist. You're crazy thinking you could do that. But it did exist. They weren't familiar. It didn't take me too much longer after that before I found a job doing just JavaScript. But that was the time when I really felt like I've got something that I'm doing and I want to do something radically different. And I'm going to sacrifice. Luis, you were talking about sacrifice, right? I decided I was going to sacrifice the career that I was in somewhat and do something different. So it wasn't quite like a whole career change like you were talking about, Brooke. Right? I wasn't leaving one career to do something entirely different and almost from scratch starting over, but moving from C# ASP.NET to just JavaScript, a language I knew very, very, very little at the time, was really quite a big change, and it felt like a big sacrifice. All this network that I had of C# developers, I was leaving that behind. All the people that I knew, it wasn't meetups back then, it was user groups. But all the user groups and the people that I knew there, and I knew the space and the players, the providers of tools and the thought leaders, and I left all that to go to something that was brand new and strange to me. So that was the time that I really felt like I reinvented myself. The conferences and becoming a course other, I just that one I feel like I more just kind of fell into it. It just sort of took over my life from what I was doing, and running Thinkster. But that was a really conscious change for me. I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to do something new and something different. And again, I don't really remember feeling like I have a problem. I've got to fix this problem. Like I'm not making enough money, or I'm dissatisfied in what I'm doing, or I don't like my job or the people that I'm working with. I just kind of had that. Maybe it's like a 7-year itch, right? Although at the time, I think I was like 13 years into my career or something like that, or 11 years into my career. But, I felt that need to go and do something different. Maybe I felt I was like getting stagnant and too comfortable, and I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. So again, very conscious. And I just one day decided I'm going to go start looking for jobs that are doing this and find something.
Isn't that funny though, that people hate change so much? And yet it seems like some of the most important critical times in your life are when you make that choice to actually go change something, like drastically change something. Kind of a funny double-edged sword.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. For the people, everybody else on the panel, do you feel like comfort keeps you from reinventing yourself when you need to?
100%. That's sort of what happened at my last job. Actually, most of the time now, when I sense myself getting really comfortable, I now try to force myself to do something different because being comfortable means you're not growing. And so like at my last job, I was very comfortable. Like I knew what I was doing. I was in charge of the Angular front end and I worked with great people and everything, but like I wasn't really solving new things. I was just sort of like writing the same CRUD applications over and over again from C# to Angular. And I was perfectly happy, but I wasn't really growing anymore. And that's part of what forced me to try to find something else. And then even at my current job, I was sort of in the ideal position of writing content and being pretty autonomous, but I've sort of like purposely started moving to other departments and like getting more involved as a way to force myself to become better. So I'm definitely of the mindset that like comfort is a bad thing. Comfort will keep you at your current level and you'll never get better.
Right. I feel like one of the things that have benefited me a lot in my career was moving around a lot. I had 20 jobs in the first 20 years of my career. And so that was a fair amount of moving. And I think I benefited from that in a couple of ways. One, I was using slightly different tech stacks at different places, different tools and things, even if it was still the kind of the same language and same tech stack at the core, but also just different people. Every job was a different set of people, and staying in the same job means you're working with the same people. And after a while, you've learned a lot of what you have to learn from them, certainly not everything. But I felt like that benefited me a lot. But I was also, as you were talking, I was just thinking about something about reinventing yourself. I sort of looked at when I first got into a job as a programmer, or when I sort of transitioned from being a full-time programmer to being an educator, an author, and then, sort of entrepreneur. Those were like graduations in a sense, right? When I first became a programmer, I was graduating from not having a job to having a job in a field I wanted, or not having a career. It was just I was graduating from a job to a career. And then when I went from being a full-time developer to being an educator, I was sort of moving on to the next phase of, or moving, I hate to say up, but just sort of moving on to something different. But when I reinvented myself as a front-end developer, in a way felt like I had decided what's a great rivalry in sports? LA and New York Knicks, right? Lakers and the Knicks. Is that a great sports rivalry?
The Lakers and Boston Celtics.
The Lakers and the Celtics. Okay. It's like switching from being a Lakers fan and moving to Boston, becoming a Boston Celtics fan, right? Like I really felt like I was consciously leaving a thing that I cared about and enjoyed and appreciated, that did a lot for me. And I very much left that behind to do something very different. And again, it was somewhat akin to switching the team that you root for. When I felt like when I went through this process of reinventing myself as a front-end developer, the thing that I was known for being a C# developer, certainly not as well as I became known for being, in JavaScript, but everybody that knew me knew that I was a C# .NET developer. And then I had all this, and again, back to your point, Luis, of sacrifice, I left that behind. And so for reinventing yourself is, maybe it's like, it's not just I'm trying to get the next thing. I'm trying to get a raise, a better job, more of what I have. It's I want to be different, and lots of times going different is actually more. This job that I'm in, I'm stuck. I can't make enough money, so I'm going to switch jobs, do a new job where I can make more money and be more. But reinventing is, it could be less. I got a friend who's a developer, and what he wants to do is retire and go do humanitarian work for the rest of his life, right? Like that's really reinventing yourself. So in tech, we have that opportunity. And I don't mean, hey, you're a SQL expert and now you're also a NoSQL expert. I mean, like, you're really leaving behind something to do something radically different. I think of Sean Larkin, right? Who consciously went and joined the core team for Webpack, right? Whatever he was doing before, he now became a Webpack guy, right? The Webpack guy, one of the main, if not the main Webpack guys, or people like that. Mike Brocchi, who said, I'm not going to be friends with normal people. I'm going to start being friends with Joe and other abnormal people, right? Really reinvented himself.
Abnormality is not bad. But you mentioned the idea of how other people were perceiving what you were doing, Joe, with making that change from .NET to JavaScript. But I think that internally, as I see it, and you can completely correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems a lot like with what Sam was saying as well, that you were looking to challenge yourself. It wasn't so much that you were worried about what other people think or you just wanted to be different. I think it sounds like you wanted to challenge yourself and try something new and see if you could be successful in something else.
Actually, yeah, you're probably more right than anything I said. As I look back, that was probably the thing that I felt the most, is that I wasn't challenged the way that I wanted to be. And I thought, how could I challenge, I remember feeling a lot like this is like I was excited at this opportunity to try something radically different from, yeah, it's still programming, but it felt radically different. JavaScript, I was used to typed languages. I was used to everything on this running on the server. I was not into CSS and hardly knew JavaScript at all. And it was, for me, a really big change. So I would agree with that 100%.
I had a very similar transition real quick. I worked in the Microsoft space for many years, probably about 13, 14 years as well. Before switching over, I had a mix, and then I went to JavaScript. I wasn't just a street jump for myself and my career path. But there was something about the Microsoft ecosystem with all the tooling and everything else that's provided from Microsoft. You mentioned docs and everything else. I kept on remember installing their tooling and also opting to install their MSDN, the theme bugs and everything else to learn and teach yourself. But there's a warm blanket of like wrapping yourself in that ecosystem, and to essentially step out from that into the metaphorical cold outside of the warmth of that blanket that is part of it scary, but yet also exciting. And I really enjoyed the transition that I took there, going from a pure Microsoft ecosystem to utilizing other things.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Microsoft closed ecosystem, and at the time, the very open JavaScript open source ecosystem were radically, again, another big shift for me when I did that.
You were kind of asking about comfort and, staying somewhere that's comfortable to you and safe. And as much as I think people want that sense of security and that safety, I think that the feeling of growth and like becoming more, actually developing new skills, I think that makes people happier than just being comfortable and safe all the time. Even though we like comfort and we like that safety, I still think that sense of growth and development and just feeling, that, I don't know, that excitement, that energy that comes with learning new things and growing in ways that you have been challenged. I think that's why people do it. So yeah, it's a feeling that I think is more worthwhile to people than just staying safe all the time.
Yeah, I think taking risks is how we do anything worthwhile. And so that's what fuels us to grow as people.
I think that it's a very cyclical thing, the idea of change and comfort and the desire to change is, I know that personally, I go through ebbs and flows of sometimes I just want that comfort. I want that relaxed, or less stress. I think there's another factor as well. It is, I know what I'm going to be doing. I can go in, I can do that and get it done. And focus on other areas of my life as well without the additional weight of having to worry about making additional changes. But the idea of that going up and down, the desire to make those types of changes depend with different things that are going on in your life as well. So sometimes in my career, I just wanted that complacency, that warm blanket and not achieving for more, but other times wanting to just get out there and try not just something, but anything new, because that rush and that excitement of trying to learn something new.
Definitely one of the challenges.
I was just going to say, it's that comparison of the coal versus the diamond. You can't get a diamond unless, it starts as coal. And when you apply the heat, then that coal transforms into the diamond. And I think it's the same thing with human nature and people. We cannot grow. We cannot become a diamond unless we've taken our rough beginning stages of ourself and applied the heat. And sometimes you have to apply it yourself. Other times it comes to you. But definitely, I think we need that to become, we all want to be the diamonds. And I think if you're too comfortable, then you don't feel like you're becoming anything that you're meant to be. You know that there's more for you, and you're always going to be seeking that, I think, just naturally.
Yeah, I was going to say that I heard someone say once that humans tend to gravitate to the line of least resistance, like staying on the status quo. I don't know how truthful that is, but it is something that I've seen. I observed that we tend to do whatever is that's easiest for us to do. And if you do that, you will never be breaking out of this loop that we're mentioning, right? You're not going to be redefining yourself. So it's probably one of the biggest struggles that we have. And it's probably one of the blockers that we have for doing that big thing. And about the motivation behind it, I think it's different for every one of us, but at the end of the day, you want to feel some sense of fulfillment in your life, right? And that comes in different ways. I also heard another story. I don't know whether that's a real story or not, but someone I read or heard someone say that there was some story that happened where they would take on the 30s when the economy was, collapsed back then, and people would show up on lines and try to get any kind of work for the day, that they did a study where they selected a group of people and had them like dig a hole in the morning and then fill it up in the afternoon without putting anything inside. And people would ask, like, why, you're not going to put any pipes or anything in there? No. So they were paying micro price, and the next day they called the same people, and some of them dropped. And they continued to drop, even though they were increasing the daily pay to be more than what they would get doing something else. And then they came back and interviewed them all. So like, why did you drop from the program? I mean, you were getting work every day and making a little more than what you would have made doing something else. And they were like, yeah, because I was doing something meaningless, like digging up a hole in the morning and filling it up in the afternoon, doing nothing. I felt like, my work was not adding to anything meaningful. So I guess part of that would also show up when you feel, again, I'm going back to the point is that you're going to feel that drive and fulfilling or feeling that what you do matters. It's probably one of those motivators that have you do big changes. Because I think when you redefine yourself, again, it's not only changing what you do or changing jobs or anything like that. It tend to be something really, really big in your life. It's a big change. It's not a simple thing. So
for the listeners that are out there that might be thinking to themselves, maybe, for a while I've been thinking I want to reinvent myself, or after listening to this, I am thinking that I want to reinvent myself. How do you go about deciding what, when, how to reinvent yourself? Gonna safely assume a lot of our listeners are going to be programmers. You're a programmer, you're doing something. What does it mean to reinvent yourself? What do you look at for ways to reinvent yourself? How do you reinvent yourself?
I don't know. Everybody, what works for some people doesn't always work for others. For me, when I wanted to reinvent myself or try something new, it wasn't trying to do that through my job during the day, although that happened at times as well. But I guess it's one of the two avenues that I see. One is ask at work, see if there's anything different at work that you could do to be able to move around internally within your company or within your team, different responsibilities, different types of tasks or activities that you can do to be able to do something different within the field, whether or not it's, hey, I want to be doing UI stuff inside of database or whatever that may be, whatever switch you're looking to potentially make and learn those new technologies. In fact, a lot of companies also offer a lot of training as well that you can take advantage of to help reinvent yourself. The other is to just completely and literally take it on yourself, which was the route that I went mostly, in that I started doing things at nights. I would go to work and I did my .NET work during the day. I come home, spend my family time. When my kids were in bed, I would start doing JavaScript and TypeScript and open source stuff. And that's how I transitioned my career from mostly from Microsoft technology stuff into JavaScript, TypeScript, Angular.
Yeah, I think it seems like no matter what the area of life, whether you're staying at your current job or going to a new job or doing, maybe you want to reinvent yourself physically, there's sort of this common hack of just finding somewhere that you can take more responsibility and have more people dependent on you. That's going to force you to make changes that you wouldn't be able to do by yourself. I think probably for a lot of people listening, if they're already developers and maybe they have a good job, they might be looking for more of a transformation like physically or in their personal life or something like that. And I found that that's consistent pretty much all across the board, to find something that I can take more responsibility and have more people reliant on me for something, instead of just being isolated and working for myself on things.
And I think it begins also with kind of establishing where you are first and what would be the next step for you. Go and find it. And that could be, as you said, it could be not necessarily related to the job or the company where you are, but this is where I am in terms of this part of my life. What would be the next step for me? And then plan it out and go for it. What about Joe? Does Joe have any thoughts about this?
I think that's better to get as far away as from possible is where if you want to reinvent yourself, go far away. Don't do something exactly like what you're doing. Don't say, if it were me being a .NET developer, well, I'm going to reinvent myself as a Team System Foundation server expert, right? Because TFS is .NET's CI system, right? I was already working with that. So reinventing myself as that isn't really reinventing myself because it's, I think we talked about some of these things that happen. There's the feeling of sacrifice, right? The feeling of giving up what you've gotten and the challenge, right? If there isn't challenge and if there isn't sacrifice, I don't think you are going to find the reward of reinventing yourself. So maybe that's it. Whatever it is, you should identify it as, you could tell I'm sacrificing something, or a lot in my career to do this, and I'm feeling a significant amount of challenge over what I would normally feel, right? And I'm going to take that dip where I'm going to go down. I'm going to be less effective. I'm going to be worse at what I do, right? I'm not just adding a new skill. I'm not just switching from one flavor of X to another. I'm really radically giving up and switching to something brand new. So
yeah, I don't think it is like what you're saying. I don't think it is giving up anything. I think what you're doing is sort of like repackaging yourself in a way. You're taking all of the new skills that you've learned over, X number of months or X number of years. So you didn't start your career with all of these skills, and then over time you learned new things, and then you're just sort of repackaging all of that, and you're putting all your energy into a new vision for yourself. So it's definitely not just replacing, it's taking and like repurposing everything that you've learned into something that I think you get to use as much of what you've learned in one career, in a different way, which I think is exciting. It's just, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's just feelings of accomplishment, I think, is really what it comes down to.
I agree with that. Any final thoughts here about this? I guess I do have myself one final thought about this, which is I really love the computer programming for this opportunity, right? In a lot of careers, reinventing yourself really is more about becoming a manager, moving into management or something like that. But it's programming. The languages and the tech stacks can be so vastly different from each other that switching to a new tech stack and a new language is radically different. I mean, yeah, if you're doing C# and you go over to Java, that's not a really big switch, right? But or going from AngularJS to Angular, it feels like a big switch. Everybody complained that it was a big switch. That was not a big switch, right? But you could be in very non-typed languages and go to highly typed languages. You can go to languages that are interpreted, and the entire ecosystem is different. Languages like Rust and Go that are kind of out there on the fringes. There's just so many. You can go more into the DevOps side of things and backends, and NoSQL is actually a pretty big switch as well. There's just so many opportunities in development to go and do something that really is quite different. So I think that's a really cool aspect of development and then you just get to go back through an awesome learning curve of learning things and figuring things out and getting to feel silly and dumb for a while, and then learning and more and more and more, and then getting back to feeling those familiar feelings of competence and confidence in what you're doing.
For me, it was one of the most awesome things about development was the community around and just how willing everybody is to help and support you. In other industries, I'm not going to say that people aren't willing, but it just seems like it's not as friendly. And I don't know, just moving into development, I found that so many people were just so happy to help you and support you. But that's kind of the last thing, Joe, you asked, does anybody have any last thoughts? And I'd say that for me is one of the important things to remember with any kind of reinvention is that like it's easy to see what other people have and go, oh yeah, the grass really is greener over there. But the journey to getting there isn't easy. And unless you've built a really strong support system for yourself, whether that be at home or at work with your friends, it's not going to be easy. So I would just say, make sure that when you decide that change is what's best for you at that time in your life, make sure that you've got a really good support system around you, and it'll be a lot more achievable.
I almost feel like I want to add PSA, so there's a public service announcement, that we're sharing our experiences about how we reinvented ourselves and what we think, but it ultimately comes down to a decision about you. That you have to make for yourself on whether or not you want to reinvent yourself and the means in which you go about doing it. That you have to make the decision based off of you, not based off of necessarily anything that we've said. I mean, sure, listen and understand the factors that limit our decision process, but ultimately the decision is yours.
Yep. Know that it's going to be hard, but you will be happier on the other side when you fill up that void, or you get that fulfillment or that feeling of, yes, what I do now matters, and I like who I am. Everything that is worthwhile is going to take, first, it's going to bring a lot of risk, but it's going to be hard to do. So don't give up, keep going, and exercise that grit.
Awesome. All right, well, let's wrap up with things we would tell a friend. Brocchi, you may not seem familiar to you. It's basically just picks.
I can go with things that I tell friends.
Who wants to go first?
I dropped something on chat. It's a newsletter called howitactuallyworks.com. So howitactuallyworks.com. It's a simple newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter. It has normally 5 or 6 articles. Super good. Okay. You're always going to find a gem in there. It's by Trevor McKendrick. He does a great job of picking up those articles. So I would say, I know it's one more newsletter. Give it a try for a couple of weeks, and I'm pretty sure you're going to find some hidden gems in there. Awesome newsletter.
I'll go. I finally got my standing desk, and I went with one by Autonomous. I'll paste that link in. And I thought I had a lot of coworkers who used this one, and it seemed like a really good balance between like sturdy and functional versus expensive. And it was like not a horribly expensive desk and feels really sturdy. It's got presets on it and things like that. So if you're looking for a standing desk, check out Autonomous. And that's mine.
I will agree with Sam's pick. I have a standing desk from Autonomous as well, and I absolutely love it. I've had it for almost 2 years now, and I'm very happy with my purchase. My choice, or my thing that I would tell a friend, is to watch The Umbrella Academy on Netflix. I enjoy the aspects of like origin stories for superheroes and comic books and those types of things, and it's a different take on all of that. It's not a traditional people with power story. It's basically real people with real problems that also have powers. So that will be my selection.
All right. So mine, I've had this for a little while, but when I'm just feeling like really exhausted and just mentally spent, I think that's always a good time for video games. But I have one that I just love to dork out with, which is, it's not a true video game like on a Nintendo console, but it's the Jedi Challenges that Lenovo makes. And you have to have an iPhone for it. So that's kind of the one crappy thing. But if you have an iPhone and you want a good like AR game, Jedi Challenges is really cool. You go in, like you put on the headset, and that's my one complaint about it, is that the headset is not very comfortable, but it's worth it anyway. But there's like 3 different modes of play. So you can actually go and like challenge Jedi with your headset on. So you're like competing against like Kylo Ren, different, Sith and Jedi. Or you can go and play kind of like that game like Civilizations, where you're commanding your little armies to go around and like attack other armies. But you're doing that with like the rebels, and you're going right. It's really cool. Or you can play the holo chess. So 3 different modes of gameplay, but it's just really fun. And they've dropped the price so much. It's like $100. So it's not that expensive, and it's totally worth the money. But it's the Lenovo Jedi Challenges.
Awesome.
I thought Joe dropped that because it's Star Wars.
Joe doesn't have an iPhone.
No, don't have an iPhone. Is that everybody? Did everybody go? All right. Well, thanks everybody for being on the show, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back next time with another episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Adios.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.